So it's setting up dyan. So, kailangan. Okay, we're live. Yan. So, good evening to everyone. This is episode 19 of USAPANG BATAS with Attorney Bagsic. And as promised, kasi before, if you would remember, yung last episode natin last week was about how to become a barrister and solicitor in New Zealand. And because of that video, maraming nag-iinteresado, especially with our kababayan lawyers in New Zealand. So, so many questions about yung especially yung the discuss na pathway to migrating to New Zealand, which in particular yung student visa pathway. Kasi admittedly, hindi naman shortage ang lawyers sa New Zealand. Actually, there's an oversupply of lawyers in New Zealand. But for lawyers, especially those who want to migrate, overseas lawyers who want to migrate to New Zealand, and I believe that the student visa pathway might be the only option if you want to migrate to New Zealand. And we're very fortunate na I was able to know someone. Actually, we live in different cities in New Zealand. I'm in Auckland, and our guest is who lives and works in Wellington. They're actually they're also lawyers in the Philippines. Sabi nga, power couple ng Wellington, New Zealand kasi both lawyers eh. And dami pala nilang fans sa Philippines kasi when I posted there'll be my guest, and daming nag-like and daming nag-comment. So I'm very privileged with me tonight si Attorney Giancarlo Miranda, and syempre ang wife niya si Attorney Janeca Naboya Miranda. Tama ba?
Tama
so good
po.
evening, Gian.
Magandang gabi po. Yung fans, hindi totoo yun, Attorney Gin. No? Parang walang fans, para mga kamag-anak ko yun. Tsaka iba
ba?
mga nabayaran ko yun.
Okay. So, Gian, I think we've talked about this one before going live kasi sabi ko, syempre there are also other lawyers in New Zealand, Filipino lawyers. But I believe kayo yung best people who would talk about this one kasi of course, you're both lawyers, mag-asawa, and you've done the pathway. And of course, it's not to encourage all the lawyers to come here, di ba? Pero for those who are interested, kasi alam ko masigat naman yung New Zealand in the Philippines about, especially during COVID. Pero I think both of you, Gian and Jenica, would be a great people to talk to and ask these questions. No? So, but before we start, Gian, I mean, do you wanna talk about yung life more ni Jenica in the Philippines? I mean, of course, before, after law school, no, when you started your legal career in the Philippines.
Sige po. Typical na story, Attorney Jean. Nagtapos ng political science sa Lasal Taft, then nagtuloy ng pag-abogasya sa Ateneo. After na nag-work sa isang maliit na firm, and nag-work ako sa Middle East sa isang international law firm. So mainly ang practice nung nasa Middle East na ako is ICC arbitration, corporate and commercial, oil and gas. So maganda yung opportunity doon, lalo na sa mga Filipino lawyers na hindi pa nasubukan yung practice sa Middle East. Then afterwards, nabigyan kami ng opportunity rin na makapag-pursue ng Master of Laws sa Europe through a full scholarship. So parehas kaming mag-asawa. Nakapag-aral ng 1 year sa Budapest, Hungary. I think na-move na yung na-transfer na yung eskwelahan namin sa Vienna this year. Pero sinagot ng eskwelahan lahat ng expenses from accommodation, stipend, yung mga research grants, tsaka yung tuition fees. So very fortunate na natapos namin yun. And also after nung makuha namin yung degree, we were thinking about going to a place or immigrating to a place na may work-life balance. And tumatak sa isipan namin yung New Zealand. Bakit hindi kami pumunta sa New Zealand? And since gusto naman ni Mrs. na mag-pursue ng PhD, na-explore namin yung opportunity na pumunta sa New Zealand. Kaya ngayon nandito kami sa Wellington.
Wow. Do you know anyone in New Zealand kay ni Janeka, Gian, when you were considering New Zealand? Do you know relatives or friends or
relatives? Halos wala eh. Talagang wala po kaming kilala dito sa New Zealand. Siguro yung current ambassador natin, si Ambassador Gary Domingo, na na-meet na namin in 2012 sa Geneva. Siguro siya yung maaaring kilala. Kaya nung nagkita-kita nga dito, parang small world eh. Parang in 2012 consul pa lang siya noon. Tapos ngayon ambassador na siya ng Pilipinas sa New Zealand. So nakakatuwa. Parang dito pa kami nagkita. Pero yung talagang kamag-anak na talagang maasahan namin, talagang wala kaming kakilala. Talagang nagbakasakali lang kami sa pagpunta sa New Zealand, particularly sa Wellington. Kasi sabi nga namin, baka dito sa Wellington mas malaking opportunity na makapagtrabaho sa gobyerno dahil given na ang Wellington is the seat of government ng New Zealand. Kaya
syempre Gian, di ba yung lawyers yung isa sa mga profession sa atin na when you take up law or maging lawyer ka, parang you would not dream or even consider migrating, di ba? Kasi
exactly.
Di ba, ang hirap ng pag-alas ng law tapos bigla kang aalis. So it's not transferable yung skills, pero yung knowledge parang hindi masyadong apply, especially when you transfer from one jurisdiction to another, di ba? So was it mahirap bang mag-decide na you leave everything behind sa Philippines, or paano ba yung nag-decide para consider na mag-migrate to other countries?
Nasa law school pa lang ako, Attorney Jean, yung consideration ko talaga is to go abroad eh. Talagang buo na yung pangarap ko, maybe work for the United Nations or an international organization. So that was also one of the reasons why we decided to pursue an LLM in Europe. Sabi ko, gusto ko i-explore yung yung ibang jurisdiction, kasi yung legal knowledge naman it's universal eh. Kung ano yung legal principle sa isang bansa, parehas din yun sa yung contract laws, yung essentially yung principles nun parehas lang eh. So nasa law school pa lang kami, nakahiligan na naming mag-asawa sumali sa mga conferences, sa mga competitions abroad. So doon nagsimula yung namulat kami na subukan kaya natin sa ibang bansa. And also yung parents ko kasi nasa Qatar na. So meron akong resident visa noon sa Qatar. So sabi ko, bakit hindi ko explore yung opportunity? And ayun nga, nakahanap kami ng work sa isang law firm, which is also maganda rin yung experience kasi ibang-iba siya dun sa legal practice sa Pilipinas. Na-realize ko dun na ang laki pala ng legal practice. Yung mga cross-border transactions, sabi ko, parang ang ganda nito kasi sa Pilipinas ang very parang domestic yung sentro ng practice. Katulad ng, for instance, yung mga criminal cases, paano i-file yan, yung annulment, family law cases. So although marami na ngayong mga cases na yung mga cross-border din sa Southeast Asia. So yun talaga yung interest namin ever since. So parang nag-swak din yung New Zealand na itry. Sabi ko, subukan natin, baka makapasok tayo sa gobyerno dito.
Oh, that's good. Tapos in terms of yung studying naman of course nag-aral na kayo sa Philippines, nag-aral na rin kayo sa Europe. So how would you compare yung studying in New Zealand naman? Since o baka si Janeka makasagot mo kasi siya nag-aral.
Si wife ko siguro kasi si wife is doing a PhD in law sa Victoria University of Wellington.
Yes.
So siguro ma-explain niya further kung ano yung experience niya. May bata pa, pasensya na kayo. Hindi kasi uso ang katulong dito sa New Zealand.
Mahirap kasi ibaba to pag binaba ko to, baka umiyak eh. Pero hindi naman siya, she's fine. So, yung experience ko kasi yung PhD dito, it's mostly self-directed. So yung ibig sabihin nun, I am in a 3 or 4 year program. Tapos meron lang kaming milestones na pinag-aagrihan ng supervisors ko. So we meet twice a month, 3 times a month. Tapos nagmi-meeting lang kami about the milestones. So let's say they'll tell me write half of chapter 2. Tapos these are the guidelines. Tapos magre-research ako. I have full access to all of the resources in the school. Meron akong sariling office, may sariling computer ako. But it's up to me whether I want to work on site or gusto ko sa ibang library as long as I meet the milestones that we agreed upon. So I think the LLM program is a little bit different kasi syempre kailangan pumasok doon, may classes regularly. Pero for the PhD, talagang medyo isolating din siya. Kasi ikaw lang mag-isa eh, tas dalawa lang kami sa office namin. Sometimes hindi rin siya pumapasok. Kasi ikaw na talaga bahala as long as you finish writing your dissertation in 3 or 4 years. Okay na yun. Tapos, meron lang kaming 6-month. For the first year at least, you have to present your thesis in the first 6 months. Tapos i-approve ng school. And then after that, parang yung meetings nyo with the supervisors become less and less. Kasi na-surpass mo na yung, parang na-approve na yung topic mo eh. So now, it's up to you to go and flourish and write it. And then, ganun. So it's a good environment. Kasi nakakapag-work din ako. So I can work full-time as well. Kasi yung work din naman dito, ang daling kausap. I can just tell my manager, meet ko lang yung supervisors ko for 1 hour. And it's no problem with them. Kasi alam naman nila na nagpi-PhD din ako. So it's no issue sa lahat ng naging employers ko dito. They're very supportive of further studies as well.
Pero kayo, Janeca, kasi di ba, yung student pagiging when you studied your LLM, when you studied your PhD, so fairly recently lang I mean, it's not na parang nag-practice ka ng 10 years and then you'll go back to school or LLM. So I think those are the people who are asking me now, mga ganun, mga tipong who've been in the practice for how many years and then they want to study. Do you think mahirap bang to get back into the horse again to study, parang ganun, in terms of LLM and PhD?
I don't think so kasi ang LLM kasi parang binibigyan ka ng independence to think to a certain extent. Hindi siya parang nakasanayan natin sa law school na merong recitation, merong kailangan magbasa ka ng 1,000 pages a day para alam mo 'yun, para masabi mo ano yung facts of the case. Pagdating kasi sa LLM, siguro yun yung hindi pa masyadong hinog sa Pilipinas, yung academic tradition na mostly research, meron ka mga coursework, meron ka mga seminars. Ayoko naman sabihin na mas madali, pero mas siya, manageable.
Tsaka mas mature yung learning.
Yung learning. So I think kung doon sa mga lawyers na nag-practice na matagal na tapos who are willing to go back to university, pursue an LLM for instance, hindi naman siguro sila mahihirapan kasi yung skills andun na eh. Ang mainly ang skill na kailangan mo sa LLM is yung pagsusulat. And hindi ang LLM hindi siya parang meron kang 8 subjects in 1 semester. Usually mga 3 subjects lang yan. Meron ka lang MWF na subject tapos meron ka lang kailangan ipasa na paper. So hindi siya parang kasing hectic or sobrang ganun katindi yung pressure tulad ng nasa law school tayo.
Saka i-add ko lang kasi nagsisit-in ako sa LLM classes na tinuturo ng supervisors ko. Ano sila dito? I can't speak for the other law schools in New Zealand, but at least at Vic, yung LLM classes nila, yung recitation, sinasabi lang ng supervisor ko na you get points each time you recite, but it's up to you.
Walang pilitan.
Kung ayaw mo ng extra points, makinig ka lang, pero kung gusto mo, it's up to you entirely how much you want to participate. So in that sense, parang it's more it's ano ba?
Voluntary.
Oo, voluntary. So kung ayaw mo magsalita for this day, no issues.
So parang gaya nga sabi, you're treated as adults, diba?
Exactly.
Oo. So,
hindi ka hihimatayin sa nervyos.
Yeah.
Tulad nung sa law
wala
school.
bang flashcards sinashuffle
Wala.
na? Okay. So in terms of choosing, syempre merong specialization or concentration sa LLM or sa PhDs. Is it dependent on your previous work experience or really depends on what you want? How do you apply it on ano ba? Sorry, don't know, kaya I'm asking you if ever.
Not necessarily kasi usually sa ano yan, sir, sa interest mo talaga. Kung kunwari nag-pursue ka na ang career mo sa Pilipinas is mainly on criminal or commercial, tapos all of a sudden you wanted to pursue a career in human rights. Gusto mag-pursue ng Master of Laws in Human Rights. So hindi siya issue for as long as pagdating sa motivation letter mo, mapakita mo lang yung ano yung reason mo. For example, gusto mong eventually magkaroon ng sarili mong advocacy or mag-work for a think tank or work for the public sector. So mas pinapahalagan yung motivation letter dito as opposed to yung previous experience mo sa lawyer. Kaya mas at saka mas lenient sila sa pagtanggap ng estudyante for as long as you are able to meet all the minimum requirements.
Okay. In terms of New Zealand ba, in terms of LLM and PhD, very diverse ba? Marami bang options in terms of specialization or limited ba din ba on what New Zealand has to offer? Kumbaga.
Kasi nung bago pumunta rito, so we also did our research. Sa ang mga marami ring streams sa LLM, for example, commercial, human rights, parang development related, if you want to do a Master of Laws na related sa public policy, meron din. Halos lahat naman nako-cover nila kasi malalaki yung mga law faculty dito. Meron silang department for yun nga yung sa kung gusto mo sa contracts or gusto mo sa kunwari mga criminal cases, gusto mong doon ng specialization ng criminal ng thesis mo or ng dissertation mo, makakapag-cater yung New Zealand. Particularly ang mga kilalang eskwelahan dito pagdating sa law is yung University of Auckland and Victoria University of Wellington. So yun yung naging top 2 choices namin sa paghahanap ng university. Although si Janeco was already accepted in a PhD program in Auckland, but then we were thinking about the job prospects. Sabi ko baka pag sa Auckland ako baka mas mahirapan. Ako kasi tawag dito yung alam ko kasi parang mostly corporate and commercial ang mas sikat sa Auckland. So naisip namin pumunta ng Wellington primarily because of yung opportunities nga sa public sector, and knowing na Wellington yung seat ng government, halos 80% siguro 70% ng mga tao dito are working for the public sector.
Now, since you've tackled on the employment opportunities, Gianna, so can you describe yung siguro how you landed your first job or how was job hunting in New Zealand? Your experience ni Janeca, ikaw ni Janeca?
Siguro initially it was a bit overwhelming for us. Syempre coming from we were nasa Doha tayo no, tapos pumunta rito. We didn't know anyone. And syempre yung kaba na ano bang chance na makahanap kami ng trabaho dito. I think yung mga New Zealand employers are still very conservative sa pagkuha ng empleyado, and which is logical na tama lang na syempre unahin mo yung sino yung mga nandito na. Pero once na makakuha ka ng work or New Zealand experience, talagang mas madali na. So sa experience ko, naalala ko, Attorney Jean, nung nagpasa ako, yun nga, syempre, left and right ang mga rejection emails. Nasanay na nga ako eh. Ang malaking nakatulong sa akin dito sa New Zealand, yung mga headhunters. So, dito kasi sa New Zealand, particularly sa Wellington, yung mga headhunter, nag-sign up ako. So, mahilig sila dito magkape. So, interviewin ka, kamusta, ganyan. Tapos, nagpa-enlist ako sa halos lahat na yata ng headhunters dito sa Wellington. Tapos, umattend ako ng mga interviews. Tsaka dito, uso din, Attorney Jean, yung nagsisend ng email tapos makikipag meet up for coffee sa mga employer. Kasi may nagsabi sa akin, subukan mo kaya na makipag-meeting, hanap ka lang ng email sa website nila tapos subukan mo makipag-meet. Tapos meron naman sumasagot for kung gusto malaman, kung interesado malaman yung qualifications mo. So sa unang trabaho ko, hindi ko makalimutan yung Attorney Jean nung para akong tumama sa loto noon eh. Nung tinawagan ako ng headhunter ko, sabi niya, "Oh, may interview ka this week. Ganto. Yung una kong interview is for sa Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment. Ang counterpart siguro natin sa Pilipinas parang halo-halo eh. DOLE, NEDA, pinagsama-sama eh. PTI. So it's arguably one of the biggest government agencies in New Zealand. So pinapasok ako dun sa dun sa office sa building ng MBIE, naka-Amerikano pa ako, naka-necktie pa ako. Tapos sinabi sa akin yung sinundo ako sa pinto na yung yung employer. Sabi niya, let's have coffee. Dinala ako dun sa parang canteen ng office building. Akala ko, sabi ko, aba, siguro hinahanda pa yung kung saan ako i-interviewin. Apparently, yung kwentuhan pala namin doon sa coffee shop, yun na pala yung interview ko. So, talagang inalam lang nila yung credentials mo, kung yung personality mo, kung culture fit ka. Kasi I think sa Pilipinas, pagka graduate ka from a certain university, it's almost guaranteed na you are able to get that job. Pagdating dito sa New Zealand, hindi naman nila alam yung mga eskwelahan. I think nagmamatter yung how you conduct yourself, yung somehow yung personality mo, kung magiging culture fit ka. So tinatansya din yung ugali mo.
And even amongst the Kiwis themselves, di ba po, kung napansin din namin na hindi din importante sa kanila yung mga school. Even amongst themselves, parang kebs lang sila. So we thought that was really nice and refreshing. And like Gian said, yung first hurdle talaga is yung New Zealand experience, because they're all looking for
New Zealand experience.
Paano ka magkaka-New Zealand experience kung kakarating mo lang? So it's like a circle.
Tsaka naalala ko, Attorney Jean, nung sa CV, kasi typical sa Pilipinas when you prepare your CV, naalala ko, syempre lalagay mo dyan, I'm from ganyan, from this school, Ateneo Law School, ganyan. Tapos sa trabaho mo, lalagay mo yung job description mo, di ba? Ganyan ang style ng CV sa Pilipinas. Pagdating dito, nagtanong-tanong ako sa mga tao, ang style pala ng pagsulat ng CV dito, more on output-based. So sa trabaho mo as an associate sa isang firm, ano yung mga na-accomplish mo? So ganon. Pagdating din sa interview, hindi ibang-iba yung style ng interview dito kaysa sa Pilipinas, kasi pag sa Pilipinas, pag tatanungin, so tell me something about yourself, why should we hire you? Ganon ang parang ang thought process eh. Pagdating dito, very situational. Tatanungin ka ng employer if was there a situation in your previous job na you had to handle a conflict, and how are you able to solve that, or how are you able to deal with that? So very situational siya. So you have to explain yourself in a way na
yung problem solving skills mo yung or how you analyze
things and yung situation, and tsaka yun yung gusto nila eh, yung paano ka rin mag-fit in sa culture ng company, ng team.
Saka, di ba, you mentioned about job, yung mga headhunters, mga recruitment companies. Di ba dito sa New Zealand kasi it's the company that pays the recruiter, di ba?
Exactly.
The headhunter. Like sa Philippines ata, di ba, balik na data, babayaran mo yung recruiter or headhunter.
Yun din nga yung naging concern, Attorney Jean, nung nag-sign up ako sa mga headhunters dito. Sabi ko, sa Pilipinas kasi ganito ang reputation ng mga headhunters eh. Pagdating dito sa New Zealand, yayayain ka pa magkape. So, pupunta ka sa kanila, tapos mag-sign up ka sa kanila, tapos may kontrata kayo. So, dahil may mga contacts na yan, for example, yun nga, sa public sector, sa ministry na ganito, sila nang kakausap sa mga potential employers, tapos i-build up ka na. Tapos, pagdating sa bayaran, wala kang babayaran. Actually, ang kagandahan nun, mas mataas ang sahod na hihingin mo, mas mataas ang makukuha nila. So, mas i-encourage ka nila na, kunwari, sabihin mo, ganito, this much money. So, mas tataas, 10% na makukuha nila. So, win-win situation actually for both yung yung naghahanap ng trabaho tsaka dun sa agency.
No,
si
that really turned things around for us kasi yun nga sabi nga ni Gian, sila yung lalaban para sa iyo eh. So sila na yung magbe-build up. Tapos minsan may trabaho ako na hindi na ako in-interview kasi binild up na ako ng headhunter. So
sila yung nag-vouch.
The employer didn't interview me anymore and then they hired me. Hindi ko na kailangan parang right away. Sige, sabi ng headhunter, ito daw yung skills mo and I trust them. And if they trust you, then okay na.
Ang bilis dito, Attorney Jean, kapag ka nagustuhan ka, parang kinabukasan, start ka na eh. Ganon dito eh.
Hindi na ba tinatanong sa interview yung where's the Philippines? Kasi 2006, tinatanong ko. Wala na bang ganon? Where's the Philippines?
Magandang beach eh.
Alam na nila? Yung, hindi na ba kayong for someone who just arrived in New Zealand, you speak very good English. Hindi na ba kayo ginaganon?
Meron nagsasabi sa akin na is English your first language. So medyo na-flatter naman ako. So parang,
hindi, marami na nagsasabi sa akin na I've been to Palawan, I've been to Boracay.
Gagawin sila.
So, alam na nila.
Okay.
Medyo kilala nila. Pero, ayun nga, I think sa department namin, parang ako lang yung work visa doon eh. Lahat puro mga Kiwis.
Kasi, I mean, some people wouldn't know na akala nila pag government agency, akala nila dapat citizen or resident, diba? Pero there are some positions na it's not sensitive, I mean, no privacy issue, so they wouldn't mind na someone na work visa, di ba?
Usually, ang mahirap pasukin kapag if you wanted to pursue a career in the public sector, ang mga mahirap pasukin na ministry, ang mga Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, parang ano yan eh. DFA natin sa Pilipinas, yung Ministry of Defense, yan, yung mga, syempre may mga very sensitive information dyan na kailangan at least tumira ka sa New Zealand ng 10 taon.
Mas siguro immigration.
Sa immigration,
meron ba mga support staff siguro pero officers, I don't think you can be a work visa holder. I don't know.
Napansin namin attorney na even if kunwari syempre pag nag-a-apply kami, ako personally I wanted to work in the MFAT. Pero alam ko na kailangan citizen ka, but I still tried. Tapos ang babait nila kasi magi-email pa sila para mag-sorry sa'yo kasi hindi ka citizen. So we can't, we can't grant you an interview. Parang sila pa yung mahihiya, sila pa yung magsasorry sa'yo na, ay, sorry, hindi ka kasi citizen eh. So I think that just ties into how nice they are here.
Yun lang ang kagandahan, attorney, kasi merong closure. Kapag
yan ang mahirap, walang closure, no?
Mahirap eh. Hangin kayo pareha. So, alam mo you know what to expect. So, alam mo na, mag-move on ka na. Pero ang kagandahan dito, Attorney Jean, no, pagka nagustuhan ka nila, sasabihin talaga nila na ilalagay namin itong CV mo sa file namin. So, for potential yung jobs in the future, ikaw tatawagan namin. Kasi nangyari yun kay Jamaica.
Yeah, and they actually parang pag sinabi nilang gagawin nila yon, gagawin talaga nila.
That's
kasi
good.
meron akong in-applyan
sa MB din.
Sa MB, parang I think it was data privacy officer.
Tapos yun.
Or advisor.
Advisor.
Kaya lang they were taking so long to decide. So tinanggap ko na yung current position ko ngayon. Tapos yung nag-interview sa akin, sabi niya, I'll have another position opening up for a senior position in a few months. Can I keep your CV on file? Tapos a few months later, kinontak niya ako personally. Tapos nag-email siya, sabi niya, there's a senior position opening up. Would you like to apply? Parang manganganak na ako noon, and then happy na ako sa team ko ngayon, ganun. So sabi ko na lang na thank you so much for thinking of me, ganun. Pero nagulat ako na she actually got back to me and she said she did what she said she was gonna do. So I was very impressed with the professionalism.
So parang I'm hearing your stories ha. So parang I feel na you've made the right decision in studying and living in Wellington kasi most of the opportunities for overseas lawyers are, I think, as in the public sector, Gian and Janeca. So, and nandyan kayo, so I think mas marami opportunities dyan rather than kagaya ko, I was in Auckland, so of course I don't know anyone in Wellington. So it's good na you're parang giving this parang eye-opener na kung lawyer pala, dapat dyan sa Wellington in terms of new migrants.
Kasi well, it's safe to say that kasi nung nag-apply ako, ang una kong naging job is investigator. So mainly working on prosecution. So it's a niche practice. So parang nagpo-prosecute kami ng sa construction license building practitioners. So very legal yung yung nature ng trabaho. Umattend ka ng hearing, tapos kinakausap mo yung mga yung mga akusado din kasi dumadaan sa amin. Nakakatuwa lang dito, Attorney Jin, no, kapag gumagawa ka ng investigations, ang isang ugali ng Kiwi, kapag nagkamali sila, umaamin sa phone. Sila na nagsasorry eh. So,
kasi very honest, I mean, generally, di ba? Medyo talaga
very
honest talaga mga tao sa New Zealand, di ba? Generally.
Nagugulat nga ako sa sobrang honesty ng Attorney Jin eh. Kasi parang sumusuko na eh. So, ayun. Tapos, I think yung naging second job ko, very legal related din. After ko sa Ministry of Business, nalipat ako sa Commerce Commission, which is ang counterpart nun sa Pilipinas is yung Philippine Competition Commission. So, ang work ko is sa regulations and compliance. So, enforcement ng Fair Trading Act and ng Consumer Guarantees Act. So, yung nasamahan ko ding team, puro a bunch of lawyers din. Mga iba't mga Queen's Counsel. So, ang ganda rin ng opportunity kasi akala ko parang suntok sa buwan na makahanap ng work na related sa tinapos mo. Kasi yun ang naman ang primary concern din ng mga lawyers why they are, iffy about moving to another country. And then yung current job ko ngayon sa Ministry of Education, naman siya, policy related. So, I'm working mainly on parang project management, drafting papers for the Minister of Education and yung mga cabinet papers, ganun. So, masaya yung experience, lalo kung kunwari lawyer ka and tapos ang background mo political science. So, nakikita mo talaga kung paano nangyayari from end-to-end process yung kung paano nabubuo yung batas. Tsaka yung mga concepts na, for example, yung transparency and accountability, sa libro ko lang nababasa yun eh, nung pagpunta ko dito sa public sector sa New Zealand. Talagang stricto sila. Takot ang mga tao dito. You might be familiar with yung Official Information Act na lahat ng palpak o mali mo dito masisilip ng kahit sino basta i-request mo. So, yeah.
So maganda ring, I mean, it's nice to hear, na parang even if you're still not admitted as a barrister or solicitor sa New Zealand, maraming opportunities sa lawyers dyan sa New Zealand. Of course, with the proper visa and all, pero I'm just saying na maraming pwedeng pasukan in terms of the public sector if you're a lawyer in the Philippines.
Totoo po. Kasi nung nagkaroon ako ng work experience dito sa New Zealand, doon naman dumami yung job opportunities, yung job offer sa akin. Like yung nakakatuwa nga, Attorney Jin, parang dito pa ako na-promote eh.
Yun ba?
After ko sa Ministry of Business, doon pa ako na-promote as Senior Advisor for Regulations and Compliance. Sabi ko, parang iniisip mo, bagong dating ka lang, para pagkatiwalaan ka din ng ganito. Sabi ko, parang napakalaking bagay. I think yung sikreto din minsan is syempre yung work ethics din ng mga Pilipino, talagang maaasahan din. Tsaka, alam mo yun, yung willingness din ng mga Pilipino na aralin lahat. Lalo siguro kunwari lawyer ka, parang innate na sa'yo yung yung magbasa, yung sanay ka din sa pressure, sanay ka din sa dami ng workload. Pagdating nga dito, naninibago naman ako sa workload kasi ibang-iba yung yun nga yung work-life balance nga, ibang-iba dito.
Speaking of workload and work-life balance, I mean, of course, more than 1 year na kay Tito Gian, di ba? So,
year and 2 months.
Year and 2 months. So, totoo ba ang work-life balance sa New Zealand? Lagi ko narinig, pero you being from fairly new sa New Zealand, can you say na talaga may work-life balance talaga sa New Zealand?
Ibang-iba po yung yung work-life balance dito eh. Lalo na ako yung experience ko lang from the public sector. Dito pag sinabing 4:00, nagsisimula ng magbalot-balot yung mga tao eh. 4:30 nag-uuwian na. And even kapag lunchtime, napansin ko dito yung mga tao lumalabas, naglalakad. Nagja-jogging. Lunchtime
Swimming sa
Kasi katabi namin yung beach.
Swimming sa beach.
Yung CBD ng Wellington. may beach na katabi. So minsan yung mga tao lunchtime nagbi-beach tapos babalik ng 1 o'clock may meeting. So nakita mo yung yung flexibility din. Saka sa public sector dito, walang lunch break na na designated time. Kunwari gusto mag-lunch ng 10, 11, 2:30, hindi ka pa gagalitan ng boss mo. More on output based sila dito sa anong matapos mo. Kasi tawag dito, minsan like yung experience ko sa boss ko sa Ministry of Education, pag nakita niya na naka-online pa ako ng mga 5:30 or 6, pinauuwi na ako. Sabi niya, magpahinga ka na, ganyan, spend time with your family. So, malaki yung yung importansya na binibigay nila dito na makapag-spend time ka with your family. Yun talaga yung na-appreciate namin kasi yun nga, bago pumunta rito, we were already thinking about, di ba, yung there's more to life than just clocking in 12 to 14 hours a day. So,
hindi pa ba na-experience yung pinapauwi kayo ng boss nyo, ng employer? Because sumobra ka na sa 5 o'clock, di pa na-experience yun?
Ako, lagi.
Pinapauwi ng employer, di ba? Pag, ayaw na nag-overtime ka?
Ayaw na nag-overtime.
Go home to your family. Hindi ka pa nasabihan na go home to your family. Hindi ka pa ginanon?
Nasabihan na rin ako ng ganun, sir. Tsaka nung una, kasi ang daming parang prosecution cases na hinahandle ko dun sa first job. Sabi ko, pwede ba akong pumasok ng Sabado? Tinanong ko, sabi niya, bakit ka papasok ng Sabado? Magpahinga ka. Ano pa yun ang nagsabi pa sa akin, parang tawag dito, mga managers pa yun, tsaka parang mga, kumbaga ang counterpart sa Pilipinas, parang mga USEC, ASEC sa atin. Magpahinga ka. So, parang makita mo talaga yung difference na, alam mo, hindi ka lang nagtatrabaho para magtrabaho or kumita ng pera. Meron ka rin ibang buhay after work. So, yun talaga isa sa na-appreciate namin dito sa New Zealand.
And in terms of now you're working, syempre we talked about yung applying for residence sa New Zealand, di ba? I mean, was it difficult finding a job and then applying for residence? You think na yung pagiging resident sa New Zealand, you think na nahirapan ba kayo? I mean, of course wala pa namang
very soon
decision, pero in terms of yung the process of from studying and then working and then applying for residence, you think it was difficult in your experience?
Hindi naman, siguro kasi nung nagpasa kami, Attorney Jean, siguro it took us a month and a half to find a job. So ang style din namin is very aggressive din. Sabi ko, ayoko magutom dito. Ang mahal ng bilihin dito sa New Zealand, parang lahat ginto eh. Unang tingin ko sa restaurants, sabi ko, bakit ang mahal ng mga bilihin? So, kailangan mong mabuhay. So, we made sure na talagang ang dami naming sinend applications. Pero in terms of pagpapasa sa residence visa application, kasi crucial talaga yun eh. Yun naman ang reason ng karamihan sa atin bakit pupunta tayo sa New Zealand is, to eventually consider New Zealand as your home. So, nung time namin, that was last year, nakatanggap ako ng job offer, Attorney Jean, mid-April. Nung gabing natanggap ko yung job offer ko, nagpasa agad ako ng expression of interest kasi sa mga kababayan natin yun nga, expression of interest. Para bago ka ma-consider for residence visa application, you have to file an expression of interest. Ito yung mga i-claim mo, ng mga points mo, credentials. So, nagpasa ako after a week, lumabas yung resulta ng expression of interest na nasama kami doon sa pool para maging eligible to apply for residence visa under skilled migrant category. So, mabilis, very straightforward naman ng ang proseso dito. Sasabihin nila ano yung kailangan mong i-provide, ito yung mga documents mo. So, essentially, we just brought our documents from the Philippines, yung mga transcript of records, yung birth certificate, marriage certificate, yung typical, yung usual. Tapos, ipapasa mo sa Immigration New Zealand. Online naman din ang application, so hindi naman ganun kahirap. Pero yung mga documents, for example, yung passport mo or any other documents that would yung ma-identify ka, yung medyo kailangan nila yon. So, kailangan mo ipadala yung hard copy. Pero hindi naman din ganun kahirap yung pagpapasa, yung process.
Okay. Now, I'm just gonna show everyone I prepared a simple slide lang kasi I think this would summarize your journey or your pathway sa New Zealand, Gian and Janeca, no? So, parang kasi, I think most of the questions will be about immigration related eh. So, I think, i-share ko na lang ito and then, just to summarize, yung what has occurred in your immigration journey in New Zealand in a way. Okay? Now, so I think, di ba, your entering New Zealand is in a student visa, tapos si Janeca yung student, and then you being the spouse or partner diyan, ikaw yung di ba, open work visa, is that correct?
Tama po.
Di ba? And then, of course, may baby na kayo ngayon, si Sophia. So, kasi dito sa New Zealand, when you have dependent children, if the age of the children is between 0 to 4, it's visitor visa. But if you have children na between 5 to 18, yun yung domestic student. Student visa, and they can study in any public school in New Zealand for free. So that's a policy. And so after ma-finish yung course, yung LLM or yung PhD, then you can apply for what they call a post-study work visa, and it's for 3 years. And I think it's important din na yung 3 years kasi it's only on PhD and LLM or yung mga bachelor na long-term shortages. Those are the only courses na after finishing, you will be granted a 3-year work visa. Yung ibang courses kasi 1 year lang eh. And also, it's highlight ko lang na when you have more than 3 years of work visa na in New Zealand, you're entitled to the public health system in New
2
Zealand.
years.
Diba? 2 years. So,
2 years.
then that's when, diba, you would experience na libre mga anak, diba?
Okay.
Janeca, diba?
Laking tulong niya na Attorney Jin.
Laking tulong na, diba?
Yeah.
Even if you get sick, I mean, libre sa hospital, and even if you're not a resident or a citizen, if you have a visa of more than 2 years, then you will be entitled to the public health health system in New
Pati
Zealand.
po yung mga gamot ni
Pati
baby.
yung gamot,
yeah.
Yeah, everything is free.
Pati yung pagbisita ng midwife dito, every week pupuntahan ka.
Yeah.
Yung DSWD pupuntahan ka, libre din yun. Tapos may mga binibigay silang libre. Actually, Attorney Jin, nasulit ko na yung yung investment
yung binayad
ko.
mo.
Yung binayad ko sa tuition fee.
Kinukwento ko nga when my classmates asked me about yung, di ba, yung about New Zealand, and then yung nanganak si Mrs. Sabi ko, anong nanganak si Mrs.? Si Mrs. wala akong ginastos. Parking lang. Kako galit na galit pa ako kasi whole day parking.
Attorney Jin, pati nga parking, di ako nagbayad dito.
Wala bang parking dyan. So, mas libre ka pa pala ako. May bayad ako ng whole day parking nun sa hospital. So,
una, nung nanganak si Mrs., parang nagtataka ako. Saan yung babayaran? Saan yung pipirmahan? Baka mamaya i-detain kami sa ospital.
Walang cashier yung mga hospital dito, di ba? Yun ang lahat ng mga parents dito. Kahit
sa Attorney Jin, yung pagkakunwari kumukuha kami ng gamot. Nung isang araw nga bumili ako ng gamot para kay baby. Niresetahan siya. So parang pumunta ako sa isang parang Mercury drug. Kumbaga sa Pilipinas, private pharmacy siya.
Yeah.
Siguro sabi ko, yung bill ko siguro aabot ng mga 3,000 pesos yun. Nung pagkita ko sa resibo, zero eh. Parang para ako'y nahiya eh. So, maganda yung benepisyo para sa pamilya talaga.
Yes, and parang in New Zealand you can parang really say na you see where your taxes go.
Yeah.
Parang ganun eh.
Diba? Malaki ang tax pero ang balik din.
Yeah.
Makita mo yung free education para sa bata, sa panganganak, gusto mo mag-aral uli. So kasi Attorney Jin parang yan rin ako, produkto ako ng pamilya ng isang OFW yung magtatrabaho yung magulang mo ng pagkatagal-tagal sa abroad, sa Middle East para mapatapos yung pamilya, yung mga anak. Sabi ko baka naman sa New Zealand hindi ko na danasin yan awa ng Diyos libre ang pag-aaral ng mga bata dito sa New Zealand.
Okay. So, and I mean it's always nice to hear yung nga ako I can always say na yung nga sulit yung mga taxes sa binabayad, and even ako meron akong parents dito, so 'di ba? Even more parang laging they also receive from the government. So I think that's very parang yung taxes binabayad is really parang hindi ka masakit sa loob. Although malaki syempre, 'di ba? Pero you can safely say na may napupuntahan yung mga taxes, 'di ba?
Saka Attorney Jin, sa na lang ako yung sa lifestyle na lang dito. Yung talagang siguro kung ma-encourage ko yung mga kaibigan kong abogado din, lalo na kung kunwari sobrang stressed out ka sa Pilipinas, siguro yung lifestyle dito sa New Zealand, yung talagang ang dali ng buhay. Kung ma-enjoy mo yung buhay na hindi lang puro trabaho, kasama mo yung pamilya mo, pagka wala ka sa mood, gusto mong lumabas, presko ang hangin. So maganda yung experience dito.
Okay. I think na-discuss na natin yung buong pathway nyo, Gian. I mean, I think that was helpful to our viewers kasi yun nga, they want to know on how you did it in a way kasi yun yung karaming tanong eh. And of course, most of them have families of their own, may partner, may children, so they're really considering New Zealand. And I was really thankful na you were able to share your experience, Gian and Janeca, to our viewers, both from the Philippines or kung saan man sila nanonood tonight. And actually, may mga tanong and shoutouts dito sa live natin, Gian eh.
Nakabahan ako dyan,
Si Victor and Rosel Alforte.
Kaibigan namin yan.
Mga fans ba to? So, go, Attorney Gian. Sabi gano'n.
Mga nabayaran ko yung mga yan. Sa payroll ko yan.
Tapos, pa-shoutout din daw kay Jameson Jamora.
Ayun. Mga nakausap ko na yan, sir.
Ayun ba? And galing daw ng mga Mirandas from Jomar.
Mga ninang at ninong yan.
Gano'n ba?
Baby.
And yun, I mean, all thanking everyone about the interview and sharing your life experience in New Zealand, Gian and Janeca. And again, I think that's most of the questions and the shout outs. And may pahabol. Hello to from Patricia Aguila. Do you know her?
Kilala ko yan, attorney. Next year, nandito na yan.
Andito na ba siya? Okay.
Oo, mag-LLM.
Okay. Anyway, I think we're almost an hour. Pero I mean, we've discussed everything. And again, thank you, Gian and Janeca, for sharing your experience in New Zealand. And I think marami ka na-inspire because syempre hindi naman with every success talagang dadaan ka muna sa mga hardships and trials. And now parang you're a living proof on how you're benefiting from New Zealand and living in New Zealand. Diba?
Totoo po. Sulit na sulit, sir.
Oo, sige. Anyway, maraming salamat ulit, Janeca and Gian. So hopefully hindi kayo magsawa. And hello, baby Sophia. Mukhang nagising na siya.
Nanonood din eh.
Nanonood ba? Okay, so maraming salamat ulit and thanks for watching sa ating mga kababayan.
Salamat.